This episode of the Fire Sprinkler Podcast is brought to you by Hose Monster. Rock solid flow testing equipment designed for professionals. The little Hose Monster is made from injection molded glass-filled polypropylene and is made for abuse. Combined with a range of pedaless nozzles, the Hose Monster is an inspector's match made in heaven. Either testing fire hydrants or fire pumps, Hose Monster has the equipment you need to get the job done safely. Visit hosemonster.com for more information on how you can bring your flow testing to the next level.
Like and subscribe.
Hey everybody, thanks for tuning into this episode of the Fire Sprinkler Podcast. On this episode, I have Victoria Hutchison. Victoria is involved with the NFPA Research Foundation, and she has been involved with a lot of the lithium ion or Lion battery investigation and research as far as developing the standards, expanding the standards, and kind of getting a general idea of how we're going to protect these very volatile aspects of the industry. Victoria, how's it going today?
Going great, Chris. Thanks for having me.
No, I really appreciate NFPA Research Foundation wanting to be involved with the podcast and getting this research out here. My last episode with Jacqueline was very well received, and it's an honor to be kind of involved with NFPA. This is awesome.
Well, thanks for having us. We're always happy to kind of get the word out. We're doing a lot of great research. This is, as everyone knows, an emerging topic. It's kind of touching everyone's lives. So we're doing a lot of great work, and it's a great opportunity to get the word out through your medium here. So thanks for having us. Yeah,
absolutely. So before we get into everything that NFPA has done in regards to this, NFPA research has done in regards to this, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so background, and I guess by education, I'm a fire protection engineer with an undergrad and master's in fire protection engineering from Oklahoma State and WPI. So kind of the technician side of things, and then the kind of engineering side of things with the grad school. But before that, I'm actually a third generation fire protection engineer. Kind of grew up around a sprinkler fabrication shop, and getting NFPA 13 bedtime stories is kind of the joke around our world. So, a lot of on the ground learning before I ever got into my formal education, doing inspections and learning sprinkler design and getting certifications in, CO2 and clean agent, before even going to school. That's actually how I got into energy storage as well. Working in the family business, I got into an energy storage system project that was actually going to provide power to the Winter Olympics in Sochi, Russia, which was really fascinating at the time. That was kind of the first time that I had any exposure to these types of systems, right? But then I quickly found out that there's really no information out there at that time. There's nothing in the standards. That was the first project that, you went to the standard and there was nothing on it, right? And you researched it and there was very little there either. So that kind of piqued my interest. I got involved in the research side of things and in my graduate studies and doing research on energy storage, and got in touch with NFPA and the committee process. And now here I am at the Research Foundation. So it's all kind of like falling into place, I guess. So I've been here at the foundation for the last 5 years, and now a large portion of my portfolio, and increasingly so, is on battery related topics. So anything from stationary large scale storage to electric vehicles and the whole parking garage issue, a number of things, firefighting tactics for these systems. So broad plethora of things, and also that fundamental sprinkler work as well, with improving overall sprinkler performance and design criteria to inform the standards. So lots of good stuff going on.
Yeah. So you touched on early on in the bio there that you're a third generation fire protection engineer, which in my neck of the woods and in a lot of the industry around the world, fire protection is a almost passed generation to generation, friend of the family, father, brother, cousin, nephew, et cetera, is how people get into this industry. And I didn't realize that the engineering side of things was similar. So it's interesting to hear that kind of relationship with engineering and fire protection kind of passing down. Do you remember kind of what age it was when you started realizing that fire protection was the way you wanted to go? Like, I remember when I was a kid, it was like, I'm not really going to do anything sprinkler. I think I'm going to try my own thing. And then, 19 rolls around and my plans switched, and now look at me now. Did you have a similar kind of
Yeah.
path? I didn't want to do anything. I want nothing to do with it. Nuts to you guys. You guys are crazy. Boom, here we are.
Similar trajectory, I would say. You kind of always think that you want to chart your own path because you've grown up, hearing sprinkler talk around the dinner table for your whole life, and it's like I want to do something different. But then, when I was in high school, I would work there, whenever I could, just to get some experience, get some money in your pocket, right? But then the more you're around it, the more you realize it's actually really fascinating. And when you look at what do I want to do with my life, you want to know that you're having a positive impact, right? And protecting people from fire, it's a feel good story and a feel good industry, right? And I like the challenge of problem solving, and that you're always going to a different job. There's always some innovation that's creating a new challenge, and I think that just the constant problem solving and like the changing things up all the time, right? And the fact that it was newer in the terms of engineering profession, right? There's not that many of them. I think I grew up, in the West Virginia area, and at the time I didn't know a single, like in the state, like licensed fire protection engineers. It was very rare. Like the company was in Kentucky, right? But we kind of lived in that small area there, the tri-state area. And in West Virginia, we didn't know of one, working throughout that state. So it just seemed like an opportunity to kind of grow in that area. And then I've loved it and don't regret the decision at all. It's been wonderful.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's kind of everybody's kind of get funneled back into the family business, so to speak.
Right. Yeah.
So your involvement right now is heavily into the lithium ion battery side of the research and developing those standards. What kind of challenges have you found with developing a standard or a set of guidelines, at least right now? Because I don't believe anything has been released formally through NFPA as far as storage is concerned.
Yeah, so this is one of the biggest challenges, I would say, for the fire protection industry in general, in terms of how to address this hazard. And just point of clarification that the Research Foundation is separate from NFPA. So we do try to funnel our research over to the committees and present it to them to help them make those decisions. But we do keep that process very, very separate. But on the research side, there's definitely more questions than we have answers.
Right.
And, we're trying to walk through this in a way of, where are they most likely going to be? What's going to be the most challenging hazard? And, we've done some large scale testing. We've now launched the Energy Storage Research Consortium because there's so many needs and the funding resources required to carry out those projects, and the types of resourcing that you need in terms of donations of systems and equipment to do the testing. So we've developed a new consortium around that to really help us steer and kind of have a strategy and have experts coming in, helping guide us to formulate what these questions are, what the standards need, and all of those things to answer those big questions. So it's all challenging. I would say for the battery types, right? This is one of the unique scenarios where you can easily have a fire or an explosion from the same system, right? So when you think about NFPA 13, right, it assumes ignition, right? So, but the thing is you could ignite it the same way and you could have a fire or an explosion, right? So in some of the testing that we've done, you put heaters underneath some cells to get them to go into what's known as thermal runaway. So basically a unstoppable reaction of excessive heat and pressure that leads to a fire or explosion. That with that same exact process, it may ignite 5 times, and that 6th time you get no flame and you get excessive amounts of gas, right? So that's really a big challenge in terms of designing for both. A lot of the kind of historic strategies aren't designed for both. It's designed for one or the other, right? So that's been one of the really big issues. And it's also pretty rare to see sprinklers, really be challenged against, suppressing or getting a very controlled fire. And this is one of those instances where we use the 0.3 density in some of our testing, and you see it burning right through. Like, in some cases it did prevent it from propagating to the next, but it fully burned out under full sprinkler protection. So it's posing some serious challenges that we don't really see in a lot of other areas.
So the principle that we're looking at for sprinkler, being a sprinkler podcast, is the idea of providing sprinkler for the lithium ion storage, and you haven't gotten into the manufacturing as of yet. You're still working behind that. But as far as the lithium ion storage facilities, you're looking at not essentially extinguishing, but containing and preventing spreading. Well, that's kind of the key. That's all you can really do with a water-based fire protection system.
Well, that's where we're coming to. That's not what we thought going in.
Right.
And obviously there's that misconception too between lithium ion and lithium metal. A lot of people think that you can't put water on it.
Yes.
But that's an important thing because of lithium ion, how it's structured, how the lithium is inside that battery. You can't actually put water on it. And to really control the reaction, you have to create a lot of cooling, and water is just the best resource. It has the greatest cooling capacity. So you wanted to use water, and ideally we were hoping that, with sprinkler protection, that it would be able to control it and prevent propagation, with a high enough density. It was the idea. But really, when you're thinking about it, a lot of these racks, if you've seen them, they look, kind of like a cabinet in a lot of cases. So it's really a shielded fire. So if you're not getting water directly on the batteries, all you can really do is protect your surroundings. So this really has to be, it's kind of going against kind of the traditional way that we maybe look at sprinkler protection. You have to think about it like, if you're a facility owner, you really have to think about it, what's my tolerable loss, right? Can I lose this entire string of batteries and be okay with that? Do I only want to lose one module? Can I lose an entire rack? And then you kind of have to adjust your strategy based on that, because and there's a lot of variables that play into it, right? It depends on the chemistry that you have, like how much energy is in your rack. There's a lot of factors that play into kind of the likelihood of propagation and the impact of sprinkler protection. But right. Really, what we're finding is you're protecting the surroundings and hoping that it doesn't spread further. Yeah.
Kind of, if you do have the issue now with that 0.3 density over 2,500 square feet, is that taking into account thermal runaway, or is that kind of an incipient stage fire?
So what we intended there was the 0.3 over 2,500. We were just assuming like a normal commercial space, extra hazard group 1 occupancy. So that was just kind of a starting point. Like that was what was being proposed at the time in 855, and we wanted to test and provide some data to that. And then also looking at a commercial space, if you had a single rack of batteries and you added that in there, what kind of sprinkler protection would be there. So it did go into thermal runaway. So our test was designed to get ignition, right? And then once it ignited, it got into thermal runaway and ended up spreading through the entire rack. So we did do testing on just, a free burn. So we just burned an entire rack to see what that looked like. And then we did another test with sprinkler protection to kind of quantify the impact of sprinklers on that fire. Then we had an adjacent one right beside it to see if it would propagate and what those temperatures look like in that adjacent rack.
Oh, so now what was the mindset going into the completely unprotected rack? Were you guys like, let's just see what happens here?
Well, I mean, in terms of research, right? I mean, it's fun. I think as fire engineers, you can't deny that you don't enjoy a big fire, right?
Sure. Yeah.
That's
what everybody wants to know. They want to know that you're having fun at work, and sometimes worst case scenario is some of the fun stuff to see.
Right. I mean, fingers crossed, nothing happens to the lab and everything goes smoothly, right?
Yeah, that's fair. I'll give you that.
Yeah. Okay. But you always have, firefighters nearby to be able to keep things under control if you need to. So it was actually shocking, right? To see that was one of the, at the time, a publicly available test that was available at the time. So it was pretty shocking to see the fire that comes out of something that's smaller than a refrigerator, right?
Yeah.
Just the amount of intensity there. But it's really, we did the free burn to get the baseline. We wanted to see when we put sprinklers on it, like how much of an impact does it make in terms of reduction? And like what is, if we leave it unprotected, if you don't actually get full extinguishment with sprinklers, people bring the argument of, well, do they have an impact at all? And, is it better left unprotected? So you want to have that baseline data. So that's really what that was for. But also to be able to, calculate, what's the impact of sprinkler protection and kind of prove that it's better with sprinkler protection than not, in terms of like your surrounding equipment.
Always better with sprinkler protection is
Always
the way I like to think about it, as you're on the Fire Sprinkler podcast. So now, what kind of research has the NFPA Research Foundation done in regards to, you mentioned it earlier, but we didn't get into the weeds with it, in regards to electric car parking, and who are the players that are involved in developing a set for that? Because as of right now, I believe parking garage is ordinary hazard group 1 or 2, which, when you're taking into account the 0.3 over 2,500 for commercial occupancies. But what's NFPA looking in regards to potentially developing an upgrade for multi-level parking in regards to electric cars? Would there be a designated electric car parking area? Would it be keep them outside?
Yeah, so I can speak to this a little bit. Maybe a future podcast, you can have Kevin Carr from NFPA, who's ahead of the parking garage standards. So he can speak to a lot that's going on there. But I do know in this last cycle, they did just put through a new requirement, because the requirement used to only be for underground parking garages that required sprinklers. Based on our research report that we released, I believe in 2020 or 2021 on parking garage, kind of like a holistic hazard assessment of modern vehicles in the state of parking garage fires. They did make a change in the standard to require sprinkler in all garages, including open, above deck garages. Okay. So that was a pretty big change there. I think they still point to NFPA 13 in terms of density that's required, but I believe NFPA also went up a class for parking garages as well. I'd have to double check that, but I'm pretty sure it went from OH1 to OH2. I believe so. Yeah, I think at one point it was. That's why I said both, because I'm pretty sure the old standard, which is the standard that we use, is the 2013 edition here in Ontario. But I think in 2019 or 2022, it did go to 0.2. And then I think stackers is actually extra hazard. I forget which group, but car stackers and like those automated garages are even higher than that. Yeah. Right. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. But we are doing quite a bit in that area too. That's a very high priority area. There isn't, we're about to kick off a large testing study to compare internal combustion engines to EVs. So right now in most garages, right, it's just a couple EV parking spots. We're expecting that to expand pretty drastically. I know there was some discussions in California of, certain lots or parking garages are going to be 25 to 40 or 50% allocation for EVs, right? So as that shift kind of starts to take place, we're going to be seeing this a lot more. And there's a lot of questions that we don't know. What we're seeing right now from the test data that's out there is that they're pretty comparable when you look at like overall heat release that's coming off of the vehicles. But the kind of behavior and characteristics is very different. But when you look at overall kind of like the body of the vehicle, right, those are predominantly made of plastics now. So that's really driving the fire. And it's all, where does it ignite? Did you ignite it in the battery itself in the electric vehicle, or, did the gas tank or the engine in the ICE? So that kind of affects a lot of things. So we are trying to get together a project that should be kicking off really soon to do a large scale study to compare, kind of get the free burn data for both of those, and then fully characterize the vehicle to kind of see, is what's driving it. Is it the battery? Is it the body of the car that's driving it in both of them? To see, can we have comparable protection strategies, or do they need different protection strategies? One of the challenges with EVs though is just the amount, how much longer those incidents go on for, right? And then the impact of that on the structure of the garage as well. So there's
Yep.
other factors there.
Well, and I mean, I won't say it's similar to designing a mercantile facility or a multi-tenant occupancy. When you get, this was designed for light hazard, and then the next guy that moves in is actually doing some, light manufacturing, and it jumps up to an OH2, right?
Right. Yeah.
The difference with a parking garage is your hazard location, if you don't have designated areas, can change daily. Somebody comes in with a Tesla, doesn't want to park all the electric car parking. If they do go that route and have a designated car parking, all those spots are full. So they park in a regular spot. And then all of a sudden you have a uncontrolled fire simply because of the convenience or lack thereof of available parking. That's a hazard that changes on the daily, right? As far as the amount of cars parking in specific locations.
Parking garages today, that we are seeing a lot of changes, right? So some, right now they have dedicated parking areas, but that's not always the case, right? If someone isn't, decides that they don't need their car charged and they're going to, go park in between, that's a hazard as well. Now you have mixed fuels, right? So you have, gasoline possibly beside electric vehicle, and that's something that we don't fully understand right now either. Is like, what's the hazard of propagation between mixed fuel vehicles, and what does that look like? So that's something that we're considering doing in a future phase as well. Just looking at fire spread vehicle to vehicle. So what does an ICE to an ICE look like? What does an EV to an EV look like? Now what's an ICE to an EV, and vice versa, right? So that's something that we want to characterize in addition to sprinkler protection on kind of several of those different scenarios as well. So all of that's forthcoming, as well as we're interested in doing some work with the car stacking systems and some of those automated garages. That's going to be causing a lot of challenges. Already is, really. A lot of those are going in. So as you think of like how cars, burn, so much faster these days, what does that look like? The good news is the limited sprinkler testing that's out there does look pretty good in terms of containing it to one vehicle. Also, when you look at statistics in underground garages where, there's been a fire and a sprinkler operated, that's a pretty good news story as well. So hopefully that trend carries on. But unfortunately, a lot of the data out there is pretty old. So we're hoping to do it with new vehicles.
And unfortunately, you say it's a good news story, but a lot of the time it doesn't make the news because it's not the doom and gloom issue. And that's always the issue with sprinkler protection, right? You have a building that has a fire and it's sprinklered, you don't hear about it because it's not big news.
It's not destructive, right?
That's right. Yeah. So who are the major players that are helping the NFPA Research Foundation in developing these standards? Do you have like the Teslas and GMs and Fords all contributing to help you guys develop this, or are they kind of letting you guys do your own thing, leaving it up to the clients to decide?
I will say some of those manufacturers in our energy storage research consortium, we actually have some of the vehicle manufacturers involved as well. Because a lot of those actually have stationary and vehicles, so they're investing in that way. We're also working with some of them to get donations of vehicles to the parking garage project as well. That's one of their top areas. Another kind of group that's concerned about this is like groups that have delivery services, right? So if you see on the news, you see, FedEx and UPS and Amazon and everyone shifting their delivery vans to electric. So those have bigger capacity than the passenger vehicles, right? And sometimes they're going to have a garage attached to a warehouse that's going to be filled with them. They're going to be stacking product and driving that in and out. What does that hazard look like? The other thing with the energy transition and electrification is electric buses. So there's incentives for schools to shift their buses to electric. There's, all the transit authorities, we've had calls where, they're looking at, they said they have 2,000 or 3,000 buses in their depot 3 stories underground, and now they're going to shift everything to electric, right? So any fire protection person is going to look at that and raise your eyebrows and not be very comfortable with that, right?
Yeah, you're going to end up just putting explosives on the pillars and then just boom.
Right. So, and then, as the size of the vehicle goes up, obviously your energy density and battery capacity goes up.
Right.
And sometimes in those buses, the batteries are in different locations. So you can almost have, different ignition sources. So, And then the other challenge is that there's reignition hazards, right? After if the fire service gets involved and puts it out, it can ignite again. And, that's something for sprinkler protection that we don't really, design for, right? We don't
Right.
expect that once the sprinkler system is turned off, that we're going to have to turn it back on again. And actually, if you go back to some of the energy storage testing that we did, right? We had 2 different chemistries that we tested. And this is just, kind of alarming from a sprinkler design perspective, right? So
Mhm.
one of them, it was about 83 kilowatt hours, and the other one was about 125. So a little bit bigger,
Right.
but not substantially bigger. The lower energy density one, we had 4 sprinklers with water put to them, and then we had the whole lab sprinklered with sensors, right? So we could see which ones would activate without flowing water.
Okay.
The lower energy density one, it activated, I think it just activated 1 sprinkler actually directly over it, and that contained it from propagation to the next one. But the other chemistry, which is known as being, more reactive, more energetic, it also has higher energy density, right? But same size unit, that actually activated 39 sprinklers in the lab.
Wow.
So that's way beyond the 2,500 square foot design area, and then
Just a bit.
just a bit.
Just a bit. Yeah.
And then you look at, that one ended up propagating to the next rack. So once the one that was ignited, once that was kind of in that decay mode, right, starting to burn out, it then propagated to the next one. We had just turned the sprinklers off. They've been off for about 30 minutes. And then the next one ignited, right? And then it fully burned. So if you can imagine, you have most of these, right? You have tons of rows of these racks together. So what if it keeps propagating like that? And what does that mean for water supply demand? So
Yeah.
something to keep in mind.
So right now, when you're designing sprinkler systems in regards to water supply, 1.5 to 2 hour water supply is kind of standard.
Mm-hmm.
Is it looking like we're going to have to go to 2-3 day water supply?
Well, I mean, when you see it in the news, right, you see that, people they're standing by these systems for long periods of time. So I think we have to look at sprinkler protection in combination with something else, right?
Right.
So what we found in the testing is that, separation distance actually has a really big impact. So if you, looking at it from combustibles or non-combustibles, our report outlines, some separation distances. For the lower energy density one, we found 3 feet was enough to prevent it from propagating. For the higher one, it was higher. And if you have, I think it was 4 to 5 feet somewhere in there that you needed to be separated. But if you don't have sprinkler protection, you're even higher range. I think you're up to 13 feet separation distance without sprinkler protection for that high energy density one before it would propagate. So, there's things like that can be done. They're also coming up with, interesting passive solutions, in combination. The manufacturers are also getting better at putting, some passive barriers and trying to prevent it from propagating, beyond the module. So there's things like that. It also depends on like where your installation is. Is it in a container that's, in a remote location? There, a lot of people are looking at dry standpipe, just putting it in, and then you essentially flood it. If happens, and you can stand off. Yep. But if you're in a building, right, and there's people there, it's kind of a different scenario, right?
Sink or swim.
Right. So your options are different and kind of limited. So it's very much, you have to kind of look at the situation that you're in and kind of use your engineering judgment to make some of those decisions.
Take the NASA launch site approach, where you just dump a water tank into a building and flood it completely. Unfortunately for the people working in there, but you knew what you were getting into when you signed up for the job. Scuba gear. And
I mean, there's limitations to water on these as well, right? So it's like, it is still an electrical system, so it can cause short circuits and things like that. So there's a lot of considerations that you have to do, but even still, it's still proving to be the best approach in terms of kind of containing it and cooling it and stopping the thermal runaway and propagation. That's really what you have to go after.
Awesome. Victoria, if anybody else that's listening wants to be more involved with the NFPA Research Foundation or has any kind of special knowledge in regard to lithium ion batteries, how do they get a hold of you guys, or how can they participate in any of the research down the road?
Yeah, so one thing in terms of our research, every project does have a project technical panel. So we do select kind of a group of subject matter experts to guide that research. So if you're very involved in this type of work and have experience on committees or other things, and you think your expertise would particularly contribute to a project, definitely send an email to foundation@nfpa.org. That's how you can get in touch with us to join a committee if you want to join the Energy Storage Research Consortium. We also have a Fire Sprinkler Research Council that's free to join for anyone. It's really open forum for the industry to talk to the foundation and give us ideas for research that's needed to advance the industry forward. So that's an open forum. We hold a meeting every year at NFPA Conference and Expo for that group. So we're encourage others to join that and give us ideas, tell us what you're challenged with in the field. And then, any of our energy storage consortiums or, projects, if you want to work with us on the research itself, those are posted at nfpa.org/foundation on our website. So everything is available there. Webinars, there will be a webinar coming up on energy storage at the end of the month, looking at some design strategies. So I encourage you to go attend that as well. So that'll be at nfpa.org/webinars. So a lot going on here.
Awesome. Victoria, thanks for coming on the Fire Sprinkler podcast and talking about the advancements and what you guys are looking to do. Is there anything else that you want to touch base on before we wrap up?
I think that's it. But thanks so much for bringing me on. This has really been awesome, and happy to share more that's going on anytime.
Awesome. I will talk sprinkler with NFPA at any opportunity.
All right. Thanks.
Hey everybody, the Laying It Down for Camp Bucko fundraiser is still going on. The donations have slowed down, but the hoses have not. This sea can is starting to get filled up. These are the ones I just unloaded from the trailer. Those are the ones that were sitting here since last year. These are all still sitting here from last year. We're looking to get donations rolling in. In addition to those hoses that I just showed you, I still have a picture that I'm going to insert right here of all the fire hoses that are still up in Pickering, Ontario. Thank you to the Toronto Social Housing for donating 95% of these fire hoses, as well as everybody else from Southwestern Ontario and Ontario for donating hoses. But let's get those donations to roll in. The link is posted below. $20 a hose. Let's get some money in. Let's support Camp Bucko. Thanks, guys.